talking about just the educational institutions. There's no question that maybe Florida and Texas
We have
A&M.
a great industry. State of Virginia possibly the first state, as far as my observation is, from a standpoint of vendors, the power is possibly the best state in the union.
Would you agree if I had 4 criteria, 4 elements that made up the most activity, most robust state, that we arguably have at least 2 or 3 of them?
I don't know.
Okay, I'll show you that we do.
I'm focusing on the education side, and I'm telling you what.
I appreciate it. I'll be careful to make sure it's not saying that the educational levels are the best in the state, in the country yet.
Well, I want to make, I mean, I agree with Ali that, you know, we don't have the largest nuclear engineering programs by far. I mean, your program, our program, they're smaller in the states. But there are universities that are larger, and, you know, we're growing, you're growing. But the reality is the nuclear industry really employs engineers and people from universities, civil engineering, mechanical engineering, computer science, controls, and so while we've listed here as assets only those programs that have nuclear or radiation in the title, I think we all agree that the higher education infrastructure in Virginia is as strong as really overall as any state, and we have to acknowledge that the asset is bigger than just the programs that say nuclear in the title. The asset is civil, mechanical, electrical, computer science, plumbers, electricians. I mean, these are the people that the nuclear industry needs. And yes, our nuclear programs by themselves are smaller than some of our, the top 10 programs are listed on the back page. But as a state, I would say the higher education asset is competitive.
But nuclear is not anymore just power.
No, and that's
nuclear,
my point.
National security, nuclear security, nuclear. That's
policy,
a major part of our activities in that area. Not nuclear power.
And I would say so. If there's one weakness in this list.
Let me finish, because it's not just a number of people. Resources we need for facilities. The 2 schools I mentioned, they have research reactors. They have major facilities.
Right.
We have nothing. Correct? In the state of Virginia. So if seriously we are looking at being one of the best in the country, we need to invest. There's no other way.
And if we're going to be that, then we need to know where we're falling short now so we can advise the governor and suggest that he assist with state funding to invest in exactly what you're talking about. Fair enough?
Yes.
How we do that, we'll do outside of the room. The what we'll talk about here. And then the last thing underneath 9, if I could, is how do we actually make sure that we accomplish our mission and goals in a definable, measurable way? And the reason I put that on there is that the governor wants a plan. He wants a written plan. What is the Virginia Nuclear Energy Consortium Authority going to do to assist in making Virginia the #1 state in the union related to leveraging its nuclear science technology assets to facilitate a contribution and support for its citizenry? So we'll be creating that report this year, this calendar year, approving it and implementing it on January 1 of 2016. And you will see it at our next public meeting because it's not something we can give you outside of the meeting. Okay, fair enough. But it is being worked on now, but in order for it to be shared with you as members of the authority, it must be done at the meeting, not shared with you before. Okay? But I wanted to make you aware that we were working on that already to develop that. So then that would take us to Roman numeral 10. And I don't want to spend much time on this because of our schedule has been quite full, and we've always tried to promise to keep the meeting. Yeah.
The governor wants a plan for the authority or a plan for the consortium?
Well, he wants a plan to know how the authority is going to manage the consortium doing it. So it's really an authority, if I could, Dave, I think it's a combination of responsibilities. The consortium has unique responsibilities and the authority has unique ones too. So it'll be a combination. And that means the consortium will have to see it and agree to it and be a part of the implementation. Now the other topics, these are just things for you to consider. Really in all the discussion, and I was so impressed with the presentation that Andrew gave. You can look at this, the Virginia market for reactors is clearly not big enough to drive a whole industry. And that's what we're talking about, is how are we going to be successful on our own behalf for our individual states and the country as a whole. And part of that means we're going to have to generate an industry which arguably requires some kind of export. we want to bring that to your attention and ask you, and I don't want your answers now, but I'd like all of you to consider this. Which Virginia firms are most active internationally, particularly in Asia? How is Virginia positioned in the nuclear energy within the leading growing Southeast region, as we just heard from Andrew? What financial tools would best support that? As we see, we're not real sure where the Ex-Im Bank's going to fall out. I'm not sure the decision's been made. I think isn't the jury still out on that?
Yeah, they're looking for a vehicle.
Yeah. And then what strategies can you universities adopt to position yourselves in that global market? Right now, as you probably know from VCU, from Virginia Tech, University of Virginia, and the other institutions, Christopher Newport and everything yet, several of the universities in our country have engaged in international teaching programs, such as Texas A&M and others that have established international programs to support other sovereign states in the training of their engineers, and the training of their, to some extent, not their operators, but at least all the individuals that are outside of the actual operator area. And it makes me wonder why we couldn't do the same thing in Virginia. So it's really not so much for debate here, just consider it. Is it something you'd want to do? Is it something you're positioned to do? Is it something that you could do and would want to do if we had A, B, and C? So we know what A, B, and C is and decide if we can go out and get A, B, and C to enable you to do that. I'm just trying to look for ways in which, as we said, that we can bring the educational aspects of the state of Virginia up to be as robust as all the other parts. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, possibly go back one item, but if in fact there's going to be a plan overseeing or kind of setting forth how all this goes forward, I'm pretty sure that when I report that back to the consortium board, they will be asking what is the process for the consortium members to have input and participation in that plan.
I will, outside of the meeting, I will be happy to have that discussion with you. We will work out something that enables your consortium members to be satisfied they had full opportunity to review and input to that plan. Thanks. It's not intended for us to do this in a vacuum.
A quick one on the workforce in universities, Don, is Mason, for its small footprint, has established a campus now in South Korea. So that can be something that we can collaborate with the other Virginia universities on. It doesn't have to be a rivalry relationship, it's a partnership relationship. And so that foothold has already been made. Maybe some of the other universities, Dr.
Virginia Tech is starting one in Chennai, India.
There you go.
It's a research center. It's not actually, it's mostly for graduate research kind of thing. So we haven't actually, maybe that's something that we should talk.
You try.
Yeah, we'll try.
Those are the right countries. Those are the right countries.
And this is the kind of thing we need to be aware of.
Virginia Tech has campuses on 5 continents. All over. So
That's exactly
we have
what
a
we
lot
were
of
saying.
resources.
And just as Gary said, that's the kind of information that if we don't have it, you can probably assume we don't know it. So if you have international campuses, if you have external programs and processes and things that you're doing to the international nuclear and global community, please tell us about it so we can find ways to leverage it, to work with it, to support it, support you, supporting us. I'm really excited to hear
Maybe
that.
next time we'll get a list of collaborative activities across the globe.
Not all of them are engineering. Some
So University of Nottingham is engineering. The one in India is all engineering.
in France, it's business.
France is business, Switzerland is architecture.
My recommendation is if we can utilize the existing infrastructure to expand. That's one thing.
And I think I know where David's going. Even if it's not engineering,
No, it's
we
not.
can still leverage it if it's stuff
Yeah.
related to policy or stuff related to
But
activities or strategies that
utilize
relate
what we have.
to energy.
I think that's the key. At Virginia Tech, I know the previous president, I'm sure the current president, that one of the major initiatives was having global presence.
Okay.
And so that has been done actually, and I think there's significant. The key is on the nuclear side, I've been trying, but there's also all kinds of other things you have to do.
Great, that's good to know. And as you can see, we talked about which U.S. utilities are active internationally. And if we're talking about the state of Virginia, then that question would only be for you, sir. And, you know, but we do have utilities in the United States that own and operate nuclear facilities that do have an international footprint. It's small in some cases, it's different in other ones, but at least it's something we can be aware of and determine if there's any course of action we would want to take. And I think that's what I'm trying to find out is how can we integrate and leverage not only the unique assets of the Commonwealth, but also what's happening in the rest of the United States to the benefit of every state, so that every state has a benefit of what the other states are doing to the extent they wish to take it, you know, avail themselves of it.
So in the past, we've provided trainers and intellectual property to South Africa, and we've had safety exchange programs with the Russians to help them out. We're not doing anything presently, but it's an interesting point given the rate of growth in Asia. It might behoove the United States to take an active role in safety exchanges in Asia.
I think it's a great idea. If you wouldn't mind listing those, David, so we can leverage off that, because just, Andrew, as you were saying, when I talk to people in the State Department, the first thing we talk about is the fact that I don't have to come in with weapons to take over a sovereign nation. If I control 60 or 70% of its energy supply, I can have some influence on the decision-making processes of whoever is running that country. So, and therein lies the concern that the State Department, if it doesn't have, darn sure should have, is that, as you showed, is that we continue to see that dominance occurring related to energy supplies being provided for these other countries that are in such desperate need, all the way down and including the vast majority of Africa, and even into places into South America.
Is BWXT or Bechtel or Riga, are you participating in the Civil Nuclear Trade Advisory Committee of the Department of Commerce? Yes. Okay. So that seems to be the vehicle right now. Well, France. Okay. We're catching up with the French because what was happening is France. Given
are you
current
there
trends,
waiting
yes,
for us to arrive? Is that
no, I mean politically, in terms of using the IAEA meeting now, the U.S. companies can go to that meeting. Whereas previously, France was selling clients at that meeting and we didn't have a presence.
Well, we've had a presence there for about 7 years, and I'll be going again this year as part of the trade organization going on. We'll be talking to the secretary. A number of people come. Our chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission will also be there. But and no reference at all, Mary Alice, or anything about the Bush. But we really there's things we can do to actually benefit safety, security, and non-proliferation issues by allowing U.S. companies to export their goods and services, especially their training and their processes and their cultures and the way they do business. And I'd like to see that happen. And I haven't personally been ecstatic about what the Civil Nuclear Trade Advisory Committee has been able to do to date, and I've probably voiced it so many times that's why I'm no longer on the SENTAC. So I'll be starting my own organization, and we'll see how that works. I want you to know I'm going to run as Donald Trump's vice president because they think I'll take heat off of Trump. I can't believe I said that.
I can't believe you said that on the record.
Yeah, me neither. I fully expect to have that tape. Okay. Let's move on to new business. You know, I was halfway joking to you, please. We're going to have an annual report. That annual report is typically given to the state legislature in November of every year. And we gave them a written report last year, and we're thinking, based on our discussion with the governor, it needs to be a verbal report. We want to get more attention from the state organizations and the activities that are happening to give them a sense of what really VNEC and Virginia Nuclear Energy Consortium Authority are doing. And so that means we may have to alter the format a little. So what Chris is going to be doing is sending out the format of the last year's report and asking for your input.
I'm sorry, so I think I heard you say it's going to be a verbal.
I think that there's an interest and would like to be able to present it to the committees and the memberships. That I think that we're going to continue to file
in addition to this.
Yes.
I'm not proposing in lieu of. I'm talking about in addition to.
Yeah. So it would that Chris and Tim Teamley work with the Commerce Labor Committee and see what opportunities there may be to present to them. And but I would certainly agree that we will get the more that members of the authority can talk to legislators about what we're doing and other policymakers is really the only way it gets you real attention. And everybody does this.
I'm certainly not, suggesting that the legislators didn't read our written report.
I mean, No, I would suggest that.
That's why I'm letting you suggest that. So, if that's something you guys are amenable to, I think that's something we should be trying to do, and we're going to ask for permission, but I don't take no well. So we'll work on that. If there's no comments, questions about that, our next one will be our next meeting is currently scheduled for November 5th. Now, when is the actual time our report's due? November 11th?
Per the code is the 1st of December.
1st of December. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that we picked the November 5th date originally to provide so that the authority can have a draft of the report, give you a little bit of time to give feedback and make changes before the December 1st date, and while also doing Thanksgiving.
So that's two of the things that you should expect to see. A plan that would have already been worked through the consortium itself at the next meeting.